Geoffrey and Phillip come to a head. Will makes a very important decision around finding his father, and Viv has to decide if she's finally going to choose herself. What's good, y'all? It's your sis Erica Vane coming to you right here on Erica Vane TV with another Bel Air breakdown. In this video, we are going to be discussing episode 9 from season 1 of Peacock's hit series Bel Air. If you're new, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications so that you don't miss out on any of my content having conversations around this phenomenal show. Episode 9 kept the train moving on this phenomenal storytelling journey that we have with the Banks family in Bel Air. This episode was less explosive and more focused on interpersonal relationships, tons of dialogue, as well as secrets being revealed, and we're going to talk all about it. As you're watching this video, feel free to drop your comments, your thoughts, your questions, as well as your predictions in the comment section down below so that we can keep this conversation going. But without further ado, let's get into it. So the episode opens on Will and Geoffrey. Will is getting ready to go to church, and Geoffrey takes a second to help him fix his tie and confirm that he is working on Will's request, so no worries. But Geoffrey implores for him to focus on his uncle in this moment, let him handle what he has to handle in reference to his father, just show up in the way that he needs to best show up for Uncle Phil. And I thought that this was interesting that this was the very first scene of the episode, especially given how things shift for both of these characters as well as everyone else. In this breakdown, y'all, I'm going to try to focus on the character journeys. So I'm going to go character by character and talk about it in that way versus just going through the series of events in this episode. So looking at Will, right? He asked Geoffrey last episode to find his father, find out any information he could about his father because he wanted to know. In this episode, Geoffrey comes back with an envelope with everything that there is to know about Lou, Will's father, and all Will needs to do is open it and read it. And he's very reluctant to do so because of the implications of what this could mean to the family, because that's something that Geoffrey lets him know. Geoffrey tells him when he gives him the envelope, like, this is not just going to impact your life and Lou's life, but this is also going to affect or impact everyone. And while I appreciate Geoffrey giving him the context that he needs, I don't think that when he was saying it, it was to try to communicate for him not to actually read it or not to follow up with it. But I hate the idea that Will has this pressure to stay in the dark about his father to protect others. That's not a burden that he actually needs to shoulder. It's not something that I feel like he should really even have to worry about, because at the end of the day, the truth will set everybody free, regardless of how uncomfortable it is at first to hear it. And this becomes like a little theme as we go throughout the episode. Will kind of frustrated me a little bit in this episode because he takes the envelope and he doesn't open it. He takes time to think about it, which that is 100% understandable. Like, it's a lot for you to not know so much about this person your whole life and then to be able to have all of every answer that you could possibly want that's not coming directly from them, right? In some papers within a envelope that's in your hand. That's like something really, really heavy to sit and to think on and to, just to have to process. So I understood him taking time to do that. Ultimately, he decides to give the envelope to Uncle Phil and not open it. And I'm like, boy, do you understand what Geoffrey had to go through or what he is going to go through just to do this for you, only for you to not actually want it, not actually need to open it? Sir, and I know you don't know because you don't know the ins and outs of what the relationship is with Uncle Phil and Geoffrey. You don't know how much tension and all that stuff that was caused by way of this. But when he hands it over, I literally just dropped my head because the drama and further tension that this will create. Uncle Phil had no idea that Geoffrey was going to go and get this information, especially after he explicitly asked Geoffrey not to. He didn't anticipate he was going to actually go through with it. And this creates problems for them. But we're going to talk about Geoffrey and Phillip in this episode because, in my opinion, their interactions definitely stole the show, and we got further context onto Geoffrey's character, a character I've been wanting to see more from this entire season. Aside from Will deciding that he don't want to know more about his father, he's not going to open this envelope. And one thing I will note is that I do believe that Geoffrey was right when it came to this, because once Phillip confronts Geoffrey about the envelope, he tells him, Will probably came to you, yes, and saying, oh, he doesn't want to know about his father, but he probably just didn't want to open up the envelope alone, and that was your chance to come forward and to be clean and to do it with him, and you didn't. So I 100% believe that. I don't think that this whole, for Will at least, I don't think that this whole who's my father, what actually happened is actually put to bed, especially given what happens to Will later on in the episode. So later on in the episode, he's confronted by Lisa, whose father has been planting seeds about how bad of a person Will is, and then pulls up his mugshot back from Philly. Doesn't give her complete context at all, which is what we saw in the trailer to this episode. She confronts him saying that he completely lied about who he is. And what I will say is, y'all, the scene was a lot better than what the trailer kind of implied that it was going to be. While I don't think that Will owed her telling her everything, especially given the major part of it is that his uncle broke the law to be able to put him in a position to have a better life and have a second chance, that is not something that is just 100% for him to share, because again, it puts other people in it and that compromises them. That's also part of Uncle Phil's story, so that's not necessarily something for him to share specifically. I do understand how she feels like she was left out of the loop. One of the things that she says in a conversation with Will is like she told him everything. What still brings a little bit of concern for me with Lisa and how she responded is that she came in wielding this mugshot, and it's almost to allow the audience to assume that she thinks that if you have a mugshot, you're automatically a bad person. And I don't know if it's just because of where I come from, coming from Baltimore and having like friends and family and boyfriends who've gone to jail, like who have like done stuff. So to me, that isn't alarming. And shout out to some of the subbies, because some people have commented like, oh wow, Erica, we're surprised that you responded the way that you did and you're so understanding. Maybe it's honestly because of that, y'all. Like, I've dated people who were in jail or who have gone to jail, and that doesn't mean that they're bad people, period. And I didn't necessarily like that it felt like her character was kind of communicating, oh, you got this mugshot, so you are automatically a bad person and you're not who I have known you to be. And at this point, I feel like Will has been in Bel Air maybe about 2 months now. We don't have a clear understanding of the timeline, but I'm gonna go ahead and assume he's been in Bel Air for at least 2 months. He is not now a completely different person than who you have grown and known him to be for 2 months because you found out he has a mugshot. Like, girl, come on now. And this is a moment where I feel like this is her Bel Air showing. This is the piece of like, okay, you're really well adjusted. You're really tapped into, you know, your culture and your blackness, and you seem very much so different from Carlton. However, this response is given very much so black girl who grew up in Bel Air and who has a certain scope, or maybe has been exposed to a specific scope. And with that scope comes certain assumptions about different circumstances, if y'all know what I mean. But at the end of their whole interaction, there's like this little silent head-to-head moment, which I feel endeared to. Like, again, I was always really, really pro Will and Lisa. I love the connection that they had immediately. I love how they were able to navigate each other and support each other. I love the dialogue that they have with each other. It was really just off-putting for me how she responded specifically to the whole mugshot and learning about a little bit more about Will's past. I'm hoping that they're able to make it. However, it's not necessarily clear in the way that they leave off. In the conversation, Will does come clean and tell her everything, like everything. So there is nothing else for, you know, her to feel like she's missing out on. And ultimately, I think that this is going to be the thing that also brings Will back to the conversation around his father, and coming clean and understanding what the omission of specific truths has done to his relationship with Lisa, or put her in a position of not being able to trust him or feel like she could trust him. I think that he's going to think back on, well, what am I missing, or what else could be happening, or what could be generated from me actually ignoring the truth when it comes to my father. So I definitely think that he's coming back for that envelope, Uncle Phil. So don't get too comfortable, my brother. Overall, this was a very emotional episode for Will, and I like to see it. Like, I think that this was a really good episode to show the range that Jabari Banks has, because he's going from moments at church where he's like chatting up everybody, he's charismatic as ever, he's bubbly. At one moment, Carlton got to tell him to calm down when he's like introducing himself to Ivy. It's so dope to see. But then you do have also the really heavy emotional beats between him and Lisa, and then when he goes to check in on Carlton and Carlton is able to reveal, you know, what he reveals, because we're going to talk about Carlton too. I love the range that we get from Jabari as Will in this episode. But going to Geoffrey, because like I said, the episode starts off with Geoffrey and Will. Geoffrey, in this episode, we get to learn a little bit more about him by way of how he's responded to Phillip and how honest he's choosing to be. There's so many moments where he just has to let it fly, and I'm so glad that he did, because in addition to providing context for who Geoffrey is, we give further context into who Phillip Banks is. And when I tell you I feel so validated in how Geoffrey read Phillip down, because I feel like he's selfish. I feel like he is overly ambitious and completely has an eclipse view of everybody and anything that's not necessarily in line with his goals. Again, it just felt validating to hear Geoffrey call him to the carpet about it and really put into perspective of like, yo, your ambitions sometimes can be to the detriment of others. And at the end of the day, it's one thing to be ambitious, it's another to be constantly moving the goalpost and constantly be moving the finish line, so that you just wind up being on this hamster wheel of completely sacrificing others or having others sacrifice themselves to keep moving you forward. Meanwhile, nothing is ever going to be enough. And it's so interesting because there was so much backlash in the conversation early on in the season when we were talking about Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil. So many men that were just DMing me and commenting of like, he provides and why isn't that enough for her? He has amassed a large amount of money, a certain amount of power and influence and acclaim. While y'all asking why isn't just being a housewife and taking care of enough for Aunt Viv, why isn't the level of success that Uncle Phil has amassed today enough for him? Oh, okay. What I will say is I need to know more about Geoffrey. They keep alluding to this son that he has, that he loves, or this child, I think it's a son, but this child that he loves and he doesn't have. And I'm like, well, did he leave him in Jamaica? Like, is it with his other parent? Like, what is actually going on? What is the circumstances around him being with your family and riding for your family as hard as he is? But meanwhile, he has his own seed that he's not able to show up for, but clearly feels a way about. And Phillip kind of throws that in his face while they're arguing in this episode. How he is responding to Will in support of Will finding out what he needs to know about his dad, and then checking Phillip on, not fully seeing his family, compromising his family and sacrificing his family in a lot of ways for his ambitions. It would lead me to believe that Geoffrey did not leave his child, and the circumstances are definitely outside of his control, because he's giving a man who would do anything for family, is 100% loyal to family, and understands that there's a delicate balance that needs to be at least attempted to be achieved and maintained when it comes to having ambitions, being, the patriarch of a family, and really ensuring that people are not just taken care of financially, but emotionally and mentally as well. The last thing that I must say on Geoffrey is I'm so grateful for him in the scenes with Geoffrey and Phillip, and watching him be honest with this man who's not just his employer, but also feels like extended family, his brother. It's so powerful to see the amount of love and respect that he has for him, and how that is manifested in a moment where you know that this person that you love deeply is clearly wrong. You know of their self-destructive tendencies, you know of their simply destructive tendencies, and having to confront that and trying to do that in the best way possible. Like, you can literally see in the performance of Jimmy in this episode the confliction in wanting to do what's right, but then also still wanting to love on his brother. I was almost moved to tears watching these dudes like in the scenes together. They were really, really powerful. And fellas, get you a Geoffrey. If at least one of your friends is not a Geoffrey, you need to reassess your circle, my brothers. Moving on, let's go to Carlton. Since we're talking about the man of the episode, Carlton has a pretty cool episode. We are fully in his journey of redemption, I think. He started the season off, like a rocket that was sent to blow up everything, okay? But in this episode, we get to see how him and Will are really cultivating a solid friendship and getting to really great places as family and as confidants. Will is able to share with him for a moment at church how he's feeling about his father and finding out more information about his father. Carlton is able to be vulnerable with him about his anxiety and how he is utilizing drugs to try to cope with that specific anxiety. And you can see the levels of trust building up between these two young brothers, and it's good to see. They speak after Hilary prompts Will to go and check on Carlton because he performs at the church but then gets stage fright and kind of like allows his anxiety to take over and is not able to complete his performance. And because Will knows so much, Hilary pushes him to go and check on him, and in that, Will has a real conversation with him about he's going to be there for him regardless. He wants him to be able to trust him to help when Carlton needs it so that he doesn't have to carry the weight of all of what he feels like he has to carry on his own. And I love that for them. Carlton even doubles back at some point in this episode and tells Will, like, yo, that conversation you had with me stopped me from using today and I'm going to be done with this stuff. And you get to see these two not only taking steps forward within their relationship, but also Carlton taking this full step forward in the journey of his character and getting to a better place in life. I think one of the things that stood out to me the most at the top of this episode is just how awkward Carlton is. He seems so uncomfortable, or like his responses, like I'm watching him sometimes and I'm trying to figure out if this is just his personality or if he truly just feels uncomfortable, because he's always so short and he's always so like devoid of emotion when he's interacting with people. He's like, all right, okay, yeah. And I'm just like, brother, can you liven up a little bit? And maybe that's what we're about to see as he gets to a place of vulnerability with Will and he starts to feel safe with somebody. I think the next thing for Carlton to address, now that he's committing to, you know, getting sober and leaving these drugs alone, the next thing that he's going to need to assess is the expectations that he's allowing to be placed on him. So in the conversation with him and Will in this episode, he talks about the weight of like wanting to just make his father proud. Phillip wanted him to sing. He has a beautiful voice, so he got up there and did it even though he didn't actually want to do it. He had anxiety around it, right? He talked about sports. He talked about his grades. And I made this comment last episode when I did the breakdown, but Carlton, if you do not want these things, release yourself from the shackles of needing to get them, achieve them, and excel at them, because it is destroying you. It is putting you in a place of making you feel miserable, making you feel unimportant, making you feel unappreciated, making you feel unloved. And it's a very, very toxic cycle to be in. So I am looking forward to Carlton walking into the next phase of his like life and getting to the point where he realizes that his father loves him regardless. And that's something that Will tries to speak to in this episode, but it's going to take some time for him to get it. Maybe with Phillip making the decision that he made and decides to focus on his family, he'll be able to reaffirm this so that we can see moving forward, whether it's in the season finale or next season, we get to see Carlton put down the weight of some of these things that he's picked up under the guise of like, this is what my father actually wants. So we gonna see, but he definitely gonna need to release it because it's so very clear the negative impact that this stuff is having on him in his life and his personality. And I can't wait till we get to the point where we actually get to see a Carlton that is happy and content. Because maybe that's at the end of the day what it is. He's just not happy in the life that he has. But overall, very solid episode for Carlton. Now, the man of the hour. This episode was, to me, all about Uncle Phil. And while it started off rocky, y'all, and you know I have been on Uncle Phil's head for quite a few episodes now. I feel like he is such a selfish man, and ambition is great and all until it makes you compromise everything that you love and the people that you love, and it forces you to do things or forces the people around you to be things that they don't want to be or don't actually need to be under the guise of achieving whatever this little ambitious goal is. I struggle with Uncle Phil and not fully seeing Vivian and not valuing her art as a very big portion of her and part of what, you know, if he's in love with her, then he should also love her art and love her need to express herself creatively in that way. I struggle with him not seeing that. I struggle with him not seeing Carlton fully. I struggled with his expectations on everyone, including himself, and his willingness to do whatever it takes to kind of like succeed in this realm that he's trying to go in for DA. But in this episode, he makes an about face, and it's very interesting, honestly. I'm still kind of processing it and really trying to figure out what I feel about it. But what I will say is that my initial thoughts is that I'm proud of him. I'm proud of him for making a decision to actually bow out of the DA race In this episode, after being confronted with Geoffrey and reminded of like how selfish he can be and how he'll sacrifice everything and how the family will split under the pressure of all that he is starting to put them through and the decisions and the ambition that he has, on top of learning that Fred learned about Will and him leaning on Judge Robinson to help get Will out and all of the other things that he knows, right? He decides to walk away from the DA race. And I guess what I'm like trying to figure out is if he decided to do it because he's actually choosing his family, or if he decided to do it because he felt like he wouldn't win, which to me are two very real things and completely change how I respond to his actions. But for the purposes of this video, I think I might do a separate video to really deep dive into the motivations behind his decisions. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to go ahead and say that he's actually choosing his family. Some words resonated in my head as he was, making his speech and stepping down in the opening arguments of the debate. And it was Geoffrey telling him to prove him wrong. And I'm like, yo, this is the first step for him to do that. Prior to the debate, Phillip goes into Vivian's art room and they're having a conversation and he's like, are you telling me that I'm not pulling my weight? She doesn't say this, but no, you're not pulling your weight. And he starts to reaffirm to her that he can handle different things, that he can, step up and be who the family needs him to be, and he can handle, they can handle whatever comes to them now they don't have Geoffrey in the house, because, oh yeah, spoiler alert, Geoffrey is fired or takes a leave of absence in this episode, and I'm so irritated by it. It's like, you do not let the realest one next to you go, especially when you're headed into some of the most traumatic or tumultuous times in your life. Whether you like what he got to say or not, you need to still keep this man by your side because he has your best interest at heart. But that's another conversation for another day. They're talking and he's like, we can handle it. I can handle it. And I adored him saying those things. But as they were having a conversation in this art room, I felt myself leaning in and just wanting him to say, take the fellowship, Vivian. I got you. And when he didn't say it and he left after, she takes a moment and helps him put his blazer on and reaffirms him and has this like nurturing touch and does what women do, I was so frustrated. Like, golly, like I appreciate him saying that he's going to step up and he's going to carry his weight and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. But why couldn't he just put the cherry on top and say, take the fellowship? Like, tell her specifically to take the fellowship. I felt like that would have been a wonderful mark to the start of us understanding that he actually gets it and he actually supports her and he actually has some semblance of an idea of what to do next and how to support her. And then after that, while I'm like processing what happened in that scene, I was literally like brought to the idea of like, yo, men and women really do communicate so differently, because in that moment, the one thing that would have just set it off for me and like been so clear of, okay, he is 100% for her going after her dreams, is if he would have articulated, take the fellowship, Vivian. I got you. And he never did. And I knew, like, even in talking about this now, I knew there's going to be plenty of men of like, well, he said that he's going to carry his weight and he said this and he said that. And I'm just like, but he didn't say this thing. And this was the very real thing. But again, that could be a conversation for another day, specifically about how men and women communicate and how we communicate differently. He didn't say it in that moment. And again, I was disappointed. However, once we get to the debate and he has the moment of stepping down and then he, walks off and hugs his family and Vivian's like, yo, are you sure? Are you sure? He says it then. And I was like, okay, we cooking with gas, y'all. We got something here. He gets it. Like him, I don't know if everybody was going to register this, but I want to make a specific point of like the power in him actually saying, go for it. Take this opportunity. Whatever we need to do, we're going to do so that you can do this. That is what Vivian needed to hear. And it had to be explicitly said, because even in this episode, when we see her, go in and she has an interview about the fellowship and she's talking about her work and what she wants to do and how Will inspired her and she wants to feel free and just do and be, and she knows what her mistakes were from the past in reference to her perception and expectations on how people received her art and all of that, right? She does all of that, gets back home, and then goes back into the default of like, well, no, my family needs me. Ashley's lying about this. Hilary got her body up on the internet. Will is still adjusting. Carlton got anxiety. Phil's running for a DA race. And sometimes, specifically for us black women, and again, I only can speak from the position of a black woman, we need, and this is for lack of better words, y'all, so hear me out, validation / permission sometimes when it comes to us making decisions to be selfish. Her choosing to go after this fellowship, regardless of the amount of time it's going to pull her away from the family, regardless of all of the pressure and expectations that are going to come with the responsibility of holding this fellowship, is a selfish decision. And especially after you have spent years and years and years and years and years building your life around the ones that you love and what's best for them, you need to just go for yours and do you now. So I was so proud of Phillip for in that moment telling her explicitly to take the fellowship, because to me it felt like a key going into a lock and unlocking something. And though they're going to be still reeling as a family, I'm very interested to see where the show is going to go as Phillip takes a step back from his ambitions, and they have never been in this position before, and I could totally understand if there's going to be some negative fallout around that, and like how does he adjust to not being a priority of the family, and like Vivian taking that seat and being the focus and them tailoring the family and what the family needs to do to support her versus how they have been for years doing everything that they could to support him. That's definitely going to be something to see. But in this moment, again, I was just so very proud of Phillip for communicating that. And for the purposes of this video, I'm assuming that he has made this decision solely because he doesn't want to continue to be this selfish patriarch that is kind of steamrolling everyone that he loves, all for the sake of like achieving some things that won't even matter if he doesn't have a family next to him to stand and relish in later on. Now, again, I do feel like Phillip was the primary focus of this episode, and we got to see a lot by way of his character and his character's journey in this episode. Second to that would definitely be Vivian and her figuring out how she's going to navigate her newfound or return to her art ambitions. And then also we got a little bit of clarity around what her art ambitions look like. So she's seemingly going to be going into this very prestigious opportunity with the focus of just creating. In her interview, she speaks about the tension and the pressure she felt before of doing all of the things after the painting, but she really loved the painting. And I think now she's going to have a new approach of like really just focusing on the art and what she wants to say, and not necessarily feeling the need to defend or to define herself to people who may or may not get it as her art is being released to the world. And I love that for her. When she was speaking about this in this interview, I started to think about me, and specifically even just my channel. Like I create in a lot of different ways, but specifically here on Erica Vane TV, sometimes I get in my head about how people are going to receive something, and if I should say this or if I should say that, and how people misunderstand me all the time. And at the end of the day, I gotta do what I wanted to do. I gotta do what I believe to be true. I lead with love, deep intention. I try to bring as much intellect and thought and life perspective to my content as possible and just be me. And I can't control how people receive it or how people perceive it or how people react to it. Only thing I can control is what I put up on my channel, the things that I say, how I say it, and what the world does with it after the fact doesn't matter. It only matters if I'm proud of what I said or what I did. And I am. Hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying the content and you loving this conversation. Also, make sure that you like this video because, we be putting in a lot of work, and the likes are free and they help us get found by other people. So hit that like button for me, please. Aside from those major heavy things happening, we also get a little peek into Hilary and Jazz and what they got going on, because Hilary recruits Jazz in this episode to come help her get some of her stuff from that dang on content house. We don't necessarily know what's going on because she's breaking in to try to steal her sign and some of her things back. So clearly she hasn't paid Kylo yet, or maybe he was just holding all her stuff, ransom. Phillip makes a note in church of like how proud they are of Hilary in getting out of the contract, and she just kind of looks off a little bit. So clearly there's something still to be said there. More importantly about Hilary in this episode, we get the seeds of like her and Jazz are not going to be like an easy walk in the park. He makes a proposal in this episode that they go back to his house and he wants to cook for her, and she's like, oh yeah, that could be cool, but how about we just go back to my 5-star hotel and order room service? Hilary, baby, this is giving, do you want gas money? It's not as bad. Don't get me wrong, y'all. It's not as bad, but it's giving, do you want gas money? Girl, No, this man offered to cook for you and you basically told him no so y'all can get some room service. You are a chef. Like, you understand the love and the care and the effort that goes into cooking and what you can express by way of that. Like, girl, how did you miss it? And though Jazz doesn't respond any kind of way, you kind of just see it land on him and he like, all right, cool. This is going to be a reoccurring theme until Hilary brings her behind up out of the bougie clouds and gets a little bit down to earth, okay? But again, nobody can be perfect. And if this is going to be her flaw, I'm willing to work with it because Hilary is still a very dynamic, complex, and beautiful character that we love to see. All right, y'all, I think that is it. This breakdown has gone on a lot longer than I had anticipated. We will be doing a few other conversations specifically about Phil and his motivations for stepping out of the DA race. I want to kind of deep dive a little bit into Lisa, but I want to go back and rewatch her scenes because she definitely has that moment with Will here. And a few more. If you have any thoughts or ideas for videos that you would love for me to make or conversations that you think I should have, let me know in the comment section down below. I also will be going live at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tonight, which is Thursday, March 24th, to discuss this episode as well as everything that we have seen before this episode. So come and join me live if you want to keep the conversation going right here on Erica Vane TV. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it all the way to the end of this video, can you give me 4 heart emojis in your comments so that I know that you're a real one and I gotta show you some extra special real love in that comment section. In the meantime, check out this Bel Air video that may be perfect for you or any of the other dope breakdowns that I have from all of the top series right here on Erica Vane TV. See you in the next one.